Tonight, controversy flies around a Jays pitcher accused of sharing a homophobic video.
They've done it for a reason, and the apology really means nothing.
I feel like people should be held accountable for the action, you know what I mean?
How the apology from Anthony Bass is striking fans at the game tonight, and what the team is saying amid some calls for him to be turfed over it.
Destroying some of the best farmland in Ontario and Canada for housing.
Plus, the seeds of discontent in Ontario's farmland forcing Doug Ford to dig around for alternatives with a new plan that would allow homes to be built over fields.
It's like Zen has an input in everything, and Zen has a say. Now I see his personality coming out.
That was like, wow for me. Yeah, the first time I saw him, I cried.
And the happy tears you'll want to stick around for tonight, how a Toronto hospital is making a world first, helping kids with disabilities interact with their world like never before. Hi there, I'm Chris Glover. The Blue Jays muscled out a solid showing tonight, winning 7-2 over the Milwaukee Brewers. But a Toronto pitcher who did not play tonight is eclipsing that win. Anthony Bass caught a ton of negative attention and apologized ahead of the game after he shared a video on social endorsing a boycott of LGBTQ merchandise. Patrick Swadden joins us live from the Rogers Centre tonight. And Patrick, how did fans there at the game react to his apology tonight?
Well, Chris, a lot of those fans were saying it certainly was important for him to have apologized, but there were others that were saying that that apology did ring a little bit hollow, while certainly others in the community are saying that there's more work that needs to be done.
Community, which includes friends of mine and close family members of mine, and I am truly sorry for that. The ballpark is for everybody.
He says he'll use Blue Jays resources to better educate himself, but that's ringing hollow for some fans.
They've done it for a reason, and the apology really means nothing. The apology is to appease the person who's offended.
I feel like people should be held accountable for the action.
It's not the first time a Jays player has faced backlash from the LGBTQ community. In 2018, the Jays suspended Kevin Pillar after using a homophobic slur during a game. And it's not just baseball either. In April, the Leafs goalie refused to wear pride colors during the team's Pride Night, citing fears for his family back home in Russia. This time with Bass, the Jays manager says the apology is appreciated and it's a first step towards accountability. But the team stopped short of turfing him, as some had called for.
You know, they had an opportunity here to show that their support for the LGBT community goes beyond sort of the gestures, the really good gestures of Pride Days and rainbow flags, to say these are the times when it's tough to make meaningful action.
Now, Bass did not answer any questions from media after making that statement, Chris. And of course, this comes as the Blue Jays are hosting their Pride Night on June 9th and 10th. Now, we reached out to the Blue Jays, but there's no word yet on whether he'll be pitching on either of those nights. Chris?
Thanks, Patrick. Patrick Swadden reporting live for us tonight from Rogers Centre. The Jays will be one of many organizations celebrating Pride next month, but not the York Catholic District School Board. Its trustees voting against raising the Pride flag yesterday.
All those opposed? Joe DeMeo? After the recorded vote, the motion is defeated.
The motion was brought by 2 student trustees and supported by 4 members of the board. It would have seen the Pride flag fly at the board office, but after months of contentious meetings, it was ultimately defeated by a majority of board members with a vote of 6-4. Several demonstrators who shouted at trustees after the vote were escorted out of the meeting. Clearly, it struck a nerve with many there at the meeting last night, and today the decision garnered a lot of reaction, including an explanation from the board. Even the education minister weighed in. Meg Roberts tracked all of the reaction for us today.
We love that community. We acknowledge them as children of God. However, there are parts of that belief system that really does not align with our faith.
Chair of the York Catholic District School Board, Frank Alexander, held a press conference today to explain why the board made the decision to not fly the Pride flag.
Part of my role and part of the role of the board is to make sure that Christ remains the center of who we are, that Catholic education remains strong.
The chair says he recognizes other GTA Catholic school boards have made the decision to celebrate Pride, but hopes others take notice that York is not.
fact that we stand out or ask the question, what's different about your Catholic? What's different about us is that we stand for our faith, we stand for Christ.
Last night's decision discussed at Queen's Park today. The Ontario government has urged school boards to fly the rainbow flag. The education minister says the province still stands by that.
I've expressed my disappointment in the decision. I've been clear and consistent for the last several weeks and frankly years. I think pride is something that brings us together as a society. We've come a long way as a country.
Lecce said he will continue to encourage school boards to do their part to make sure children feel safe and respected, the opposite of what these LGBTQ Catholic high school students feel today.
Growing up in the Catholic faith and in the Catholic education system, the one thing that I've learned is that everyone should be loved, respected, and valued. And the board decided not to do that yesterday.
You can't choose which students are safe. You can't choose which students should feel welcome, because all students should.
The school board chair said it would be a violation of policy for individual Catholic schools to fly the pride flag and that there would be consequences for violating the policy. The chair also said the school board has no plans to recognize Pride Month this year. Meg Roberts, CBC News, Aurora.
Now to fresh outrage tonight from some farmers in Ontario. They are angry over a plan from the Ford government to allow more housing to be built on farmland. And as CBC Toronto reported first, the blowback is prompting the government to consider backing down. Our senior reporter, Mike Crawley, has the story.
As warm weather hits southern Ontario, here at Twin Erin Farms, it's time to spray the soybean crop. Zach Cahoon's farm is near Port Perry, a 90-minute drive from downtown Toronto. He farms around 700 hectares. You could fit 1,000 football fields on that and still have room to spare.
This is my domain. I live in the middle of a 250-acre field, and I would have it no other way.
Ontario is currently losing farmland at such a rate that 1/4 of what's left is on track to disappear in just 25 years. With the Ford government targeting 1.5 million new homes in the next decade, Zach Cahoon fears it could happen even faster.
Destroying some of the best farmland in Ontario and Canada for housing.
The Ford government wants to change Ontario's land use rules to allow up to 3 new housing lots on any parcel of agricultural land in the province. All across Ontario, farmers are calling it a bad idea.
Because it will never be farmland again once there's a house on it.
Mark Reeser is a turkey farmer on land about 10 minutes from the western edge of Kitchener.
Farmers, like everyone, recognize that there's a need to find places for people to live. But perhaps it shouldn't be on farmland. It should be somewhere else.
It doesn't make a lot of sense to me when we have urban centers that are well-serviced.
Premier? Doug Ford says the intent of the plan is so that farmers can build homes for their families.
But the number one complaint that I get when I go to the farms, I want my kids to stay on the farm, and there is certain jurisdictions that won't allow you to build an additional residence.
But farming groups say the plan opens the door to much more housing than that. They say Ontario has plenty of space to build the homes it needs without sacrificing prime agricultural land.
We're going to come up with a happy compromise and work with the farmers.
Although Ford's housing minister isn't promising to scrap the original plan, he's now telling farmers he'll consider alternatives. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Scugog Township.
Business owners from Minden, Ontario, traveled to Queen's Park again today, asking for a last-minute intervention. Their small ER is set to close permanently in just 2 days.
People are going to die because of this decision. Mr. Ford, who I am a supporter of, please reconsider this decision. Give it time.
The closure of the ER set for Thursday was a shock to the community, which got just 6 weeks' notice. For weeks, people have pushed the province to step in. Today, the health minister once again saying it is not up to her and that the decision was made at the local level. The next closest ER is a 25-minute drive from Minden. On top of worrying about the health of residents, business owners said today they worry many of the retirees who live in the area will leave and others will stop moving there. 19 degrees and just a cloud or two out there tonight. As we look live at the city's skyline, Colette Kennedy is here now with the first look at weather. And Colette, those numbers that we are seeing are really giving me summer vibes.
Yeah, here we are looking at these incredible numbers for daytime highs, obviously well above seasonal, not quite getting to record setting, although some records into northern Ontario. In fact, that's where the real heat, some of the temperatures there in the low 30s. Well, we had 30 for Windsor, 29 Kitchener. How about Sarnia at 31? Okay, you need an honorable mention for sure there. And Toronto, of course, warm in those upper 20s, but tomorrow it gets even warmer. So we're really seeing things drying out so much. Also, this air mass is quite stagnant, and with that we get into an air quality statement. If you have any kind of respiratory issues, asthma, anything like that, it can pose some problems. Okay, it's a little bit high actually tonight, and it should be coming down for the Windsor area tomorrow back to a moderate level. But looking at Toronto, the UV index, very high. We're seeing that through Ontario. The air quality health index will be around 6, so moderate for the GTA into tomorrow. And your temperature tonight, a low of 17 with generally light winds, 30 degrees tomorrow for the city. And we'll look at the extended forecast of when there could maybe be some rain when I come back.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Colette. Some shocking video to show you of a raging balcony fire at an apartment building at King and Spadina. This one happening just before 2 p.m. and Toronto Fire was called after a 2-alarm fire consumed units located on the 11th and 12th floors. Fortunately, firefighters quickly extinguished the fire and no injuries were reported. CAA has released its annual list of 10 worst roads in Ontario, and 4 Toronto streets cracked the list.
Predominantly what we're seeing is road maintenance, road potholes, what it's like to drive on these roads, and then traffic congestion. And in some cases, cycling infrastructure has come up as a reason why people are nominating these roads.
Well, here's a surprise to absolutely no one. Eglinton West took the number 2 spot. It's been under construction for the problem-plagued Eglinton Crosstown mega project. Finch, Steeles, and Lakeshore also made the top 10, but topping the list is Barton Street East in Hamilton. The CAA says that's due to persistent issues with potholes and severe cracking in the pavement.
We're very tenant-centric. We're making sure that we get as much feedback from our tenants as possible.
Still ahead, a revitalization project in Regent Park creeps closer to completion after nearly 20 years. We'll take a closer look at the model which aims to remove the stigma around community housing. The NDP introduced an opposition motion to remove David Johnstone as the government's special rapporteur on foreign interference over perceived bias. It comes after Johnston recommended Ottawa not hold a public inquiry on the matter, but instead hold public hearings.
What we're doing is we're forcing this government, with a vote, we're forcing Parliament to decide on whether or not Mr. Johnston should continue. I think that's a serious question.
MP Aaron O'Toole spoke out in the House of Commons today to say he was the target of Chinese interference. The former Conservative leader said Canada's spy agency briefed him about efforts intended to discredit him and promote false narratives. And yesterday, New Democrat MP Jenny Kwan said she was told by CSIS she had been the subject of interference by the Chinese government dating back to 2019. The motion will be voted on by MPs tomorrow afternoon. Back here in Toronto, today marks the beginning of the final phase of the Regent Park revitalization. Since the early 2000s, people have been relocated out of their community housing units and promised a return to brand new buildings. There have certainly been bumps along the way, but as Ali Chiasson reports, there are lessons from it already being applied across the city.
We take an elevator to the top floor of what will be one of the final buildings of the Regent Park revitalization project. Nearly 20 years on, this was an enormous undertaking that was always about more than shiny new buildings.
It's how we can re-envision community housing to be so much more than what it's the stigma associated with the past in our older buildings.
Today, it's a model of what's possible.
This is a model that's being taken over to Lawrence Heights. It's being in Leslie Nymark and many of our other developments. We're continuing to apply this methodology where we're very tenant-centric. We're making sure that we get as much feedback from our tenants as possible as we design the buildings, as we design the community, and making sure we take into consideration all of their needs.
The community consists of thousands of people who were displaced or relocated, as the city frames it, for years to vacate their old units to make way for the new construction. And they were at least guaranteed first dibs on a unit in the new buildings once complete.
The community, in the last phase has been waiting to move into this building, right? We know that the building now they're in is dilapidated. I heard that the electricity goes off and on at night, and the plumbing is terrible. So they're really excited about, moving to the new home.
At the same time as the revitalization was underway, so was gentrification, as the new buildings brought new money. Councillor Chris Moyes has been consulting with his constituents to make sure it still feels like home.
People felt that, these spaces were being created. Let's say the field, for example, the aquatic center, and people from the outside had greater access to it than they do. And that's something that I've actually sat down with the community to actually examine. And I've sat with city staff to, make the changes to make sure people who live here have access to the community centers that was built for them.
We met up with Soraya Ibrahim, who's lived here for 25 years. She knows people who never moved back, people who changed their minds once they saw the buildings, and people who would flip units for profit.
And learn from the mistake and move on as well, instead of sticking with the past, like this is not working, yes, it wasn't working, how can we make it better?
Soon the construction dust will settle. Soraya Ibrahim looks forward to that day.
We cried, we laughed. So this is the sense of community that you feel here is home. It's always been there. It's always been there, and it always will be there as well. And that makes it special.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
All right, now let's get to that wonderful story out of Toronto's Holland Bloorview. A new program is helping kids with disabilities perform tasks using only their minds. It is the first pediatric hospital in the world to move the technology from the lab into clinical practice. And as we saw it in action, with some families just blown away by what they thought was unimaginable for their children.
Let's turn it back on. Think about clapping. Yeah, you got it.
The Brain-Computer Interface program at Holland Bloorview allows children to interact with their world strictly through the use of their mind, just like strictly through thoughts. So it doesn't require any movement of the limbs, any vocalizations. It's strictly using brain control. We measure activity of the brain directly. So we put sensors on the child's scalp, and we have computer programs that basically analyze the signals in the brain, so we can detect when a child wants to do something intentionally and can translate those intentions into the movement of toys, painting, playing a video game, playing music, etc.
I knew Zen could always understand, but I didn't have any communication back from him kind of confirming that he can understand. And now with this technology, you can see that. Especially with the control of the car, control of the light switches. It's like Zen has an input in everything, and Zen has a say. Now I see his personality coming out with this.
With brain-computer interface system, I realized his liking of, I would think he would like that song, but he would turn it off and go, no, I don't like this song, I'm gonna listen to that song. So that was like, wow for me. Yeah, the first time I saw him, I cried.
Apples and bananas, or wheels on the bus. Okay, so these are our options.
That first session, there's always a certain amount of tension in the room because parents are anxious to see if it will work, clinicians are anxious to see if it will work, and then when you see a child activate it for the first time intentionally, like realizing that was them and they did that on purpose, it is an amazing moment.
This technology is only at the verge of, it's in the infancy stage right now. And one day the hope is this is going to grow so well that all the children who can't, verbalize their communication right now, they'll be able to speak through this technology, brain-computer interface. So it's very exciting.
Hey, Colette, how you doing? You want to say some things now? It's your turn. Go on. All right, so the warm, dry weather is welcomed by many in our region, but Colette, it is bringing with it an increased fire risk, too.
Yeah, and this is what happens when we have day after day of sunny conditions, dry conditions. We haven't seen precipitation in days more than a week for southern Ontario, the GTA, and we're carrying on with this pattern. So things really heating up, and then our fire risk, we see that rising as well. So many areas high to even extreme when you see the red areas, including a few spots around the GTA and into southwestern Ontario, something always concerning for populated areas, but for agriculture as well, just the fact that we are not seeing any kind of rain. And I'll show you where we might have a chance, but boy, it's going to be out there several days yet. So it's not just what's been happening in southern Ontario. I was mentioning some of the temperatures. We had some low 30s into northern Ontario, some areas hitting some records. And that ridge of high pressure is so strong, it's still the dominant weather pattern, so everything kind of slides around. So yes, a few little chances at getting some rain into northern Ontario, a little bit of a chance into Thursday through eastern Ontario. This is really spotty stuff, though. And then we do have a cold front that's going to go through, but it's not going to be very cold and it's not going to be very wet. But temperatures will come down a little bit into our weekend. Heat warnings, though, in place with readings like we're seeing as this carries on. Overnight temperatures that provide, in some cases, eastern Ontario a little cooler, a bit of relief, but many of these numbers are really quite significant. Makes for decent sleeping when the humidity is not too bad. It's creeping up a little bit. We find that the next few days, but it's still not too bad, not too oppressive here. So Wednesday, 30 degrees, a little bit of high thin cloud coming in through the afternoon hours. Sunny on Thursday, 29. Friday, we bring a bit more cloud in, but 30 degrees again, feeling probably closer to about 34 for that humidex. And then there's that slight cool down. The next really best chance for some rain showers looks like it's coming into next week, Tuesday, perhaps into Wednesday.
All right. Thanks, Colette. Finally, tonight, we wanted to show you this very rare sight from China, a surveillance camera recording the moment of an all-white giant panda. It is thought to be an albino, the only one of its kind in the world, and the panda can be seen on a nature reserve going about its business and interacting with friends and acquaintances, including a mother and her cub. Very adorable. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Have a great night.